Psychedelics have played a meaningful part in my recovery, and in Donna's as well. In this episode, we invited YouTuber Soberdelic James to join us and talk about his experiences with the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, as well as the role that psychedelics played in opening the door to a better life for him. But before we get into it, what's up? My name's Dan, podcaster, keynote speaker, and advocate, and I'm joined in studio by my wife and co-host Donna, and this is Hard Knocks Talks, your addictions podcast. If you're interested in fostering productive conversations about substance use in your community, organization, or event, reach out to me at daniel@hardknockstalks.com to learn more about our public speaking options. And with that, let's get into our conversation with Soberdelic James.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
What's going on, James? How are you?
Hey, Daniel, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just going to give an anxious turn. Make sure everything's going on.
I would let you know.
I got to get focused. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's going well. We had a beautiful supper tonight. I almost felt like guilty. It was so good. I mean, the neighbors are probably jealous from the smell coming off that grill, but it's one of those gifts that we have to make sure not to take for granted. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm jealous. What'd you eat?
Steaks. We had steaks and sweet potatoes, and I come on the in the studio here, and James tells me that his dogs are busy attacking a black snake, and I'm like, we don't have that problem here.
Yeah, it must be, it must be 10 to 20 degrees cooler up where you are.
Yeah, probably. So is there anything that you'd like to say, like before we actually jump into this?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I enjoy your channel, and thank you. It's an honor and a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
You do good work. I've watched your interviews, and you have addicts and alcoholics. You're carrying the message, and that I appreciate. And you have my accolades. You have my admiration for that.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
And likewise, I really and the reason that I was interested in having you is because you do talk the program. You do mention that you are you participate in the anonymous fellowships, but also I watched a stream a little while ago. Well, I watched part of one of your streams where you were eating mushrooms on the live stream. And it was funny because you would put them up to the screen and you would show, yes, these are definitely them. And then you popped it, and then you said, what did you say? And it was so funny. You're like, all right, let's get it popping, like the rappers say. I was like, this guy's got,
as they say in rap music, let's get it popping. Yeah. Mushrooms are great. Your boy Onyx might agree with this. Psilocybin mushrooms have been linked to addiction recovery, and there's studies. I'm sure you've seen successful nicotine cessation and even alcoholism and opiate as well. And we're talking 80% numbers of sustained abstinence from nicotine, being one of the hardest physically addictive chemicals on earth. I mean, I don't know if you guys have, but I've tried quitting multiple times. I actually got a Nic Tac. It's a little nicotine mint in my mouth right now. But psilocybin has been shown to help quit heavy substances like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I incorporated it into my recovery. I was 4.5 years clean of all mind altering things, and I began to incorporate cannabis and psilocybin mushrooms into my recovery. Mm-hmm. And for 2 years, that went as well as it could go with an addict like myself. I did realize that I was beginning to use them recreationally and basically instead of recovery, and I drifted further away from the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then after almost 8 years of sobriety, relapsed in May of 2023. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then drank heavily, and then I've been sober now from all things since November 30th.
So what brought you into recovery? Did you have quite a long track record with addiction? Did you grow up around it? Like, tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Oh yeah. 14. I'm 43 right now. I was born in 1980. And around 93, 1994, I discovered alcohol, pot, all things, DXM, huffing, paint thinner. Basically, before I discovered these things, I noticed that my addiction would manifest in ways like in grade school, I'd be a troublemaker, vandalizing, fighting, getting kicked out of school. So that, in a nutshell, was what, in hindsight, I viewed as my addiction manifesting before I discovered mind-altering substances like alcohol. But I started drinking when I was 14, and then 20, almost 30 years later, I finally found a God of my understanding in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I've been going to Alcoholics Anonymous for 2 decades. When I was 18, I said to myself, I'm probably an alcoholic. I'll quit when I'm 25. And then 25 came around, and I was basically like, all right, well, this ain't the time, so I'll quit when I'm 30. By the time 30 came around, even if I wanted to quit, I found that I really couldn't. And then, like I said, I'm 43 now. I've done almost a decade. I've had 12 months, 10 months clean, 18 months, and then finally almost 8 years. And then this time around, the gift of desperation, as they say in the rooms of AA, was so intense that I asked my sponsor, I said, I got to find God. Being an agnostic, I was raised Catholic. In my teens, I made my own bright ideas about God and since have been questioning it. But it occurred to me this time around that my ideas and my opinions have gotten me nothing but trouble. I mean, the evidence is there. So I said, and there's a story about this in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, exactly what happened to me, and I didn't find out till later. But I said to myself, who am I to say there is no God? You know, what are my opinions? My opinions are the ones that talk me into drinking and using and jails, institutions, and death. So I finally got the open-mindedness of the honest, open, and willing part. And the open-mindedness was, I'll take all the ideas that AA has to offer. I am no longer going by my own will, which is in fact the third step of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. And the 12 steps go throughout all of the everything from Sex and Love Anonymous to Codependence to Cocaine Anonymous. They're all the same, just you replace the word alcohol with your word of choice. And then the rest of the words are all about life, the rest of the steps.
So when you hit this rock bottom now, and let's maybe go back to when you had your initial 8 years, when you walked into those rooms, what was it that was different? Now, surely you had hard times in times past that you tried to find recovery through the rooms. What was different about the time that stuck?
Well, it stuck 8 years ago, 2016, January 18th, 2016 was my sobriety date for 8 years. And what stuck that time in the beginning was God. In fact, I was considering, God tattoos, the Serenity Prayer, and which I wouldn't mind still getting on me. I love that prayer. In the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, we say the Serenity Prayer and the Our Father and stuff. The only problem was I had found it in 2016, and I was on what we call the pink cloud. I'm sure you're familiar. You know, you're riding high on sobriety.
Yes, I rode that thing like a Harley.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
true.
you can't help it.
Yeah.
When you first put down that way of life, all the rest of life just comes flooding in, and it's like the most powerful drug on earth. It's like a pink cloud is where you end up. And we as addicts, or at least me, we go to the extreme and we ride it. You know, we go all the way. So I almost got tatted all up with God. And but that was
Serenity prayer on your forehead backwards so you can read it in the mirror.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And you know, my sponsor at the time said, just give it a minute. And he had 20 years, and he's a man of God, and he knew what I was feeling. And he was right, because I drifted away from that feeling and also drifted away from AA. There is a common thread, and I've been listening for 5 months now. I've been listening to people that tell their relapse stories, and it never fails. At one point, they'll either slip it in, or it'll be a main part of their story, but they'll say, I drifted away from AA. I drifted away from the ruins of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's a saying, meeting makers make it, keep coming back. And I live by that now. I go to meetings every day. If I find myself going because of a cute girl or something that I want to see, I back off a little. That's my ego. That's my will. The thing I've discovered this time, which even the first time 8 years ago, I didn't really, and this is unfortunate. It was almost like it wasn't up to me. And they say it takes what it takes. But 8 years ago, I was all about God, and I did the third step and everything. But this time when I did it, see what happened this time was, the first step is realize we were powerless over alcohol and our lives have become unmanageable. That step is done for me. The evidence is there. I'm obviously powerless over alcohol, 100% done. The second step is came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that can restore us to sanity. I believe that was AA. The evidence is there. I had no doubt. Just the fact that my body was going back to AA was evidence enough that my mind believed and my heart believed that AA could restore me to sanity. The third step is hand your life and your will over to the care of God as you understand him. So I got a sponsor. And this time I didn't pick my sponsor because they say our pickers are broken. If you've heard that one.
I haven't, but it makes sense. Like I can checks out, man. Peer reviewed.
Usually for relationships or careers, or just, you know, our pickers are broken. Our egos are doing the picking. You know what I mean? The choosing. So my ego and my comfort zone, and essentially what I call my addiction, which will lie to me in my own voice, was picking my sponsors. And I've had 5 of them. And one I played disc golf with. We're still friends, but we didn't really work the steps. And that's basically how my addiction was having it, which is also kind of my ego. I associate the disease of addiction with my ego and just the crafty, cunning, baffling, and powerful liar in your head that it will lie to you in your own voice. This time I asked my higher power at the time, before I found God, which I'm about to tell you that short story of how I finally found a God of my understanding. But before I did, I asked my higher power at the time was the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I asked a room full of, you know, experienced sobriety, older people. How do I pick a sponsor? A group of drunks, G-O-D, God. Yep, that's the one. And I said, how do I pick a sponsor if my picker's broken? And they all started laughing like, oh, he found a loophole, because they all knew that we all look for loopholes or our addiction will look for loopholes. And then they started to speak. And for an hour, I got suggestions from old sobriety, 20 years sobriety, 30 years sobriety. Collectively, it was, you know, centuries of sobriety. And they were saying, the first thing that made sense to me was, you don't marry your sponsor, just get a temporary sponsor. It's not that big of a deal. Second, pick someone that has what you want, which is what I thought I was doing before, but it was more like, he's got a cool job and a big house and a beautiful wife. So I'm going to do that. And he's got sobriety. Well, this time I put sobriety and spirituality first. And I actually approached a guy that I suspected wasn't too fond of me, which he responded, "What makes you think that?" And I'm like, the thing that makes me think all these other crazy ideas. Long story short, I said, I need to find God. And this man was an atheist, agnostic 15 years ago when he came into the rooms, and he's a walking example of spirituality. For 10 years, I've watched him. And so I asked him, I was a little afraid of him. It wouldn't have been someone I picked. You know what I mean? I almost went, it was the first time I kind of went against my own will and went with what the next right thing, which was, I want to work the steps. Show me how you believed in God. And he's a chemist, very logical thinking. And he said, have you ever prayed for the willingness to believe? And I said, no, and I will. And he said, another thing you can ask yourself is, who are you to say that there is no God? And that meant a lot to me, because I had just realized, in the previous, couple weeks, that my ideas were just, I've had great ideas. I've done some great things, but I have a diseased mind, and that disease is addiction, and it's not my fault. It's not because I'm dumb or weak. It is a disease of the mind and the spirit, and eventually the body, but it starts in the mind, which is why the third step exists. And he said, all right, well, if you no longer have confidence in your convictions and opinions and arguments on the existence of God, it doesn't have to be perfect. Let's just move on to step 4. And since that day, I've been giving my will to God every chance I can get, because I'll tell you, one thing that happens is my anxiety and my depression just goes out the window. As soon as I say, God, your will be done, not mine.
So what is it then? What is the God of your understanding? Like what thought in your mind? Like when you think about God, what do you see? Because like this is a very common thing when people coming into the program, either they have no desire to believe in anything that's outside of themselves. They think they are God. That's another good one. They don't even realize they think that. And the third one is that
yeah.
they can't conceptualize. And that was sort of like for me. And to this day, I still don't completely. And I've come to a place where I don't need to understand. Because like I do believe that there is this source energy, that there is this universal consciousness. There is something out there that I'm connected to that's bigger than me and offers me opportunities, So that's sort of how I lay it out for people. But like, how do you lay it out? How did it make sense to you?
That is in a nutshell, what you just said is my conception of God. I won't understand. I cannot comprehend the power, the vastness. I don't call it a him. I don't call it a her. I call it it, because it is a power that I have seen restore me to sanity, peace, and serenity. But I fully admit that I don't. I like to say, if I do understand it, if I can explain it, it would be less and less a power greater than me. And that makes sense to me. It also makes sense that I just don't know how it is working. A lot of people like to say all these bad things, in the world that happen to me and to people. And the way that I can wrap my head around that is, God is timeless. God is a big picture. When that snake was cornered by my dogs, my friend was like, "Oh, poor snake, doesn't have a place to go." I get snapping turtles and stuff in my backyard because mankind has developed so much, and we can get mad, and sometimes I do at mankind, but God is timeless. The dinosaurs ruled for 200 million years. I'm sitting here thinking mankind is selfish and ruining planet Earth. God knows planet Earth isn't even phased by man. The dinosaurs had their reign. Those are the kind of things that God knows. So when I get stuck in traffic, or my sister recently passed away, overdose on heroin. And
I'm
I
so
don't
sorry.
say that for attention or anything. Thank you. I do say it because she would want everyone to know that addiction does kill. But when that happens, I don't say, why does God do that to me? Why, you know what I mean? I say, if something, bad happens to me, somewhere something else is happening good to someone else. It's definitely not all about me. There's a whole universe. So my conception of God is so this power greater than myself is so vast. And when you seek it, because I found it instantly when he said, "Have you prayed for the willingness to believe? And who are you to say there is no God?" And for all the big book readers out there, there is the story of same thing happened to a guy in there. It was worded to him. A voice said, who are you to believe there is no God?
Mm-hmm.
And that question to me is like, for me to think that all my opinions and all my arguments and all my bright ideas are the end of logic, and that's what reigns, is pretty ridiculous.
It's a dangerous
So
place to be too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I was kind of shy of the word God too. It kept me in myself for 20 years of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to I just want everyone who's listening to be aware that the word God is of God of your understanding. Everything, it explains it all in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the founder, Bill W., was an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
My sponsor was an agnostic atheist. And I myself was an agnostic up until about 5 months ago. And I fully lay my life and my will in. And it's not because it's the right thing to do or I'm holier than thou. It's because when I do say, God, what is your will? My stress and anxiety leaves. And so the desire to drink has been gone. The obsession has been gone. And as you know, addiction is way more than just using. That's a symptom of our problem, which is in our mind and in our spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And sorry if I misquote here, but you said, like, I prayed for the willingness to believe. That is, I've never heard that, and I think that's just remarkable. Because a lot of us kind of we hear these stories of, even Dan with him having just come to this idea of hard knocks talks, like, oh, I received a message, or I heard a voice, or all these things. So I think as a society, we wait for these big moments that
That's definitely God, and
that
the
speak
clouds
to us
part and the
so
lightning comes
profoundly
down.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And like, I think, the movie industry kind of also,
Oh, yeah.
it doesn't help. You expect these like
You're
amazing
absolutely right.
moments, when you see this, like, or whatever, right? Like, we all know what I'm talking about, so I don't need to go down the rabbit hole. But
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea of the willingness to believe. That is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'd like to hear that more,
Mm-hmm.
out there.
That's what did it. I humbly asked for the willingness to believe. And HOW, how is how you recover. You're honest, open, and willing. And I've always been pretty honest. It's something I'm kind of proud of. It's just intrinsic in me. Open, I thought I was, but apparently I wasn't fully open to the idea of God. And I had to pray for the willingness to be open and then willing. Yeah. And there in the steps, there's a lot of use of the word willing. Please allow me to be willing to make amends instead of road rage, if that's your thing. Allow me to be willing to let it slide. And it's that was the key words, and my sponsor knew that. It's very important to get a sponsor, because as addicts we're sick in our own mind. And that's kind of a dirty word. I wish there was another way to put it, but it's just a sickness. It's a disease, and we have to practice our way out of it because my natural way is to wake up thinking about me. And I don't know about you, but I've never in my life gotten intoxicated for another person. So that's one example of how it's a very selfish disease. It's all about me. And that wasn't my doing. I don't wake up and decide to be all about me. It's something I have to practice my way out of. And that's another thing about the 12-step programs is they teach you to do service work. The 12th step is help another alcoholic. This is for your own good. It's to get you out of you. The disease, which I've learned, is a disease of self, and to get out of yourself is a blessing.
Let's take a quick break.
Getting out of myself was sure a blessing. All right.
Yeah. Let's look at some comments.
It really is.
So first one I'm going to put up is Spicy Peaches. She wanted to know, I assume it's a she.
Spicy's got a hot date, she says.
Yeah. So I can't miss my home group for a hot date.
Well, only if it's in God's will.
Yeah. Oh, that's like, this is God's will. How do you decide?
Yeah.
A lot of people discuss in the rooms on how I'm working in God's will, but it's cunning. Your addiction is cunning, and it will work its way into where you are calling it God's will. To keep my channel up, because there are AA traditions that no radio press or films and things I questioned about having my YouTube channel. I was ready to take it down after the things that have been happening to me from doing the right thing. I do the next right thing, and things happen that are just like they're like paychecks. They're like rewards. It's almost like God knows I'm a reward kind of guy. So like when I do the right thing, when I don't want to do it, something awesome happens in my life. It might not be the next day. It might be so I was ready to take it down, but I asked my sponsor, I said, and I didn't even sell him on the channel. I said, what do you think about the channel? And it looks like it was God's will, because he said, I have no problem with it. It's just like a 12-step. And right now I'm feeling like it is God's will, and I'm doing more and more in God's will on that plane as well. So if you got a hot date, Spicy Peaches, it might be God's will for you,
We'll move on to Dr. John, because I like Dr. John's comment. He says, addiction is a spiritual disorder requiring a spiritual solution.
I got this one.
That's a good one, Doc.
Let's see here. I can put this one up. Onyx says, we surrender to the power greater than us, God's source, creator, universal consciousness. When you're open to receive the blessings, shall flow.
I agree.
And she goes on to say as well that acronym of flow is follow love over will. And the acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real.
False evidence appearing real.
Follow love over will. I've never heard that one before.
No, me either.
I like that one.
Yeah.
James, you ever heard that one before?
I haven't, but it makes perfect sense. I'll tell you a short story. I cursed out a solicitor. I don't know if up there in Canada you guys get solicitors. Basically, they sell stuff door to door. They come to your house, ring your doorbell, and say, "Would you like to buy this?"
I had a real butthead the other day. I actually told him to like go away, because like he almost was like ready to like almost like push his way in and like sell me a new cell phone plan. I was like, Friday, man, no, cooked. Goodbye. Can I come back tomorrow? Sure. What time?
It
I don't
really
know.
gets to me too, because they'll ring the doorbell and my dogs go crazy at the doorbell, and I just don't like people ringing my doorbell, especially if they're trying to force something, on me.
Yeah.
So I said, what would you do? And my ego took over, because that's my natural state. It's everybody's natural. You know what I mean? We're human. These things happen. But here's what happened. I said, what would happen if I just took your hoverboard? He had one of those hoverboards he was riding around. I said, you're on my property. I asked you to leave. I was being Mr. Tough Guy. My ego was doing the driving. And then we exchanged some tough guy words and got into an altercation. And then he left. And as soon as I shut the door, I said to myself, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I so mean? And I knew it was going to stick with me. This was my will that did this, because I'm not perfect now. I don't just do step 3 and all of a sudden I'm totally changed. I have to practice it. So I was like bothered by it. I knew it was going to just ruin my entire Saturday. So I said, God, show me the right thing to do here. I don't know what to do. I know it's going to eat me up inside. Resentment that is said to be the number one offender of addicts and alcoholics.
Yeah.
So I was leaving my house and I was driving, and there he was again. And I don't know if this is God. Yeah, well, he had said, he had said some things. So I pulled over and I said, hey man, I'm very sorry about that. I was all up in my ego. There was no sense in me talking to you like that. I'm really sorry. And we became friends. His name's Sebastian, and we became friends. And I drove off, and I'm like, thank you, God. It's such a blessing. And just like was just said, love over will. My will was to be tough. My ego was threatened. I don't know, who's ringing my doorbell? It's kind of ridiculous the way we act sometimes, which is another thing you can turn around and look at is like, wow, that's ridiculous. I'm like in my 40s and I'm like trying to fight this guy and steal his hoverboard. And then I just did God's will, and all of a sudden I have all kinds of new friends. My entire life I've been wondering, am I intimidating? What's wrong with me? Why are people like, I don't really, but now that I'm doing God's will, it's mostly out of love instead of my own will. And I am like, apparently I'm the most approachable guy on earth now, because like I'm playing pickleball, I'm disc golfing, I got all kinds of plans. And I'm making friends with the guy on the hoverboard that's trying to sell me a security system. And it's all God's will. And I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for the program of AA. It's like, I've heard it said, God brought me, the agnostic, to AA, and AA brought me back to God. That's how and I'm extremely grateful. My life is just opening up. It's said right in the book and in the promises too, situations which used to baffle us, we will know intuitively how to handle. And that's just happened for me. And it's not from doing one of the steps, it's from doing them all, but mostly the third step, it was the magic key this time.
Let's take a quick break here and shout out tonight's sponsors. We will be right back. Oh, damn it. Hey. I'll read them. Okay. Maybe you should read them. You keep popping up. Pine Lodge, the treatment center I went to 7 years ago when I got sober, offers inpatient addictions treatment and aftercare programming in Regina, Saskatchewan. To inquire about services or make a donation, call 306-510-1891 or find their link in the description. Are you affected by someone else's substance use? Family and friends can be okay, and we do recover. Naranon can help. Contact Ronnie at 306-731-7573 for meeting information. To make contact or to learn more about today's sponsors, to check out our new merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are in the show notes below. Man, I always get nervous when I'm reading out phone numbers. Like, don't screw it up, Dan. Don't screw it up, Dan. Like, that's what's going in the back, because like one number wrong and they're calling the wrong place.
You're manifesting.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Daniel, your show and your professionalism is unmatched. I'm really impressed and inspired. You know what I mean?
I'm happy to help however I can, man. I know you're saying that you're feeling like it's time to level up, and if I can help you, if you've got questions or whatever, I'm happy to offer whatever a little bit of my expertise, because I mean, I'll tell you, like you'll rip your hair out trying to figure out all this stuff. Like, I'm very glad that I've figured, and knock on wood, like it's been a while since something's gone tragically wrong. So, and tragic is maybe a strong word.
Nothing ever went tragically wrong. Oh my goodness.
Tragic is a strong
melodramatic.
word. Yeah. Donna's seen me in some.
Daniel forgot a phone number that one time.
Oh,
Yeah. The sky's
Hey,
falling.
progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
Progress, not perfection,
yeah,
Daniel.
he finally had to surrender to that.
I did.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like the wave of energy, like the force field that would come off of him could like blow me into like the wall. It was
Yeah.
when something would go wrong. It was intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, people think I'm
that's,
crazy. People think I'm crazy for doing all of my live productions, like doing every episode like live. Like they're like, I don't know how you do that, man. I'm like, I'm crazy. That's how I like to suffer.
That's what Mr. Beast says. He's the leading YouTuber content creator. He said, he doesn't recommend his way of life. He literally every waking hour. So I understand it too.
Yeah. So James, I'm interested to know more about how you came into plant medicine. Like you find this recovery. AA is traditionally an abstinence-based program, and I know they say honest, open-minded, and willing, but there's a lot of people in the rooms that will thumb their nose at you if they find out that you are using any substances outside of a coffee. Apparently, is okay somehow. Cigarettes are fine, but anything beyond that. So anyways, I thumb my nose back at them, and maybe I shouldn't. But in any case, what was that like for you? That transition into plant medicine, the acceptance that maybe this can help. How did you find God's will in that and pursue it?
I'm glad you asked. There is one of the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous is the only requirement is a desire to stop drinking. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's said in some of the groups is please maintain your discussion to alcohol and alcohol only. So to answer your question, when I started smoking cannabis, when I started using it in my recovery, which was and I'll tell you about this in a bit, it was essentially my addiction, just wanting to get high again. Mm-hmm. Now, don't get me wrong, plant medicines do have benefits, but for this addict, I was using them recreationally, and my addiction was just being a sly snake in the grass again. But there is a saying, it's called marijuana maintenance, and then the mushrooms and the psychedelics, Bill W. actually is well known to have used LSD, and belladonna. His spiritual awakening in 1934 was in a hospital on the plant belladonna, which is from the nightshade family. It's a wild hallucination. Don't anybody go out and find it. It can cause like cardiac arrest and everything. Yeah. But there is merit in plant medicines like psilocybin, psychedelics, and cannabis. However, so to answer your question, when I started partaking in cannabis and mushrooms, my channel's now called Soberdelic James. It was called Sober James for 4.5 years. And then when I dropped that 11-gram mushroom trip,
Holy
think
wow, the heroic dose, this guy, my God.
I think one of the reasons that video did so well was because I was changing my channel name to Soberdelic James, and I was announcing that I am still sober from alcohol. In fact, I was celebrating 4 years, and I'm going to incorporate psilocybin into my recovery. Now, yes, I have benefited from psilocybin in spiritually and emotionally, and my ego has definitely taken a right sizing. And yes, it does all these things. However, I would like to beware as an addict to another addict, and any addict or alcoholic listening, beware, because it is cunning, baffling, and powerful. Our disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. Hence why I took 11 grams, online instead of on
a live stream.
And I'm sorry, was this your first dose? Or like, had you dabbled a little bit before? Like, this was not an introduction.
Like, we're gonna burn bright tonight, baby. Let's go.
Well, that's all. I'm sure you guys can relate too. We addicts, we go hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So I got to be honest. The
And
first time I did a spiritual or a journey, I can't remember. I think I only did about 3 grams, and I was so scared because I was in this realm of like, am I doing this for the right reasons, or is this my addiction coming through and being, cunning? And so
yes.
my journey was not nice. First one, it's really
Neither
brutal.
was that. And I think that's one of the reasons people like it so much too. I had a girlfriend that was chatting on my live stream. Well, she was becoming an ex-girlfriend, like live in front of everyone. She said, James, don't do it. You're sober, James. This is going to ruin everything. And I was, man, and I went through exactly what you're talking about. The guilt, maybe the suspicion that my addiction is coming in through the back door. And a lot of it wasn't a good trip. I had ended up throwing up into a bucket. And as I explain it, I was like purging not only my stomach, but also my tears and sweat. And I was so sorry that I was a selfish addict, and everyone in my life has suffered because of it. I've been so self-centered. And that's one of the things that had happened. And, but to circle back to your original question, how did I handle going back to AA? The answer is I didn't. I went to AA and gradually ventured further away from the spiritual program of Alcoholics Anonymous and further into my addiction was manifesting with the mushrooms. I had started growing pot because, well, we either go 100 or we go 0. So I liked how I could just grow this stuff and have literally pounds
James
around.
has got half measures avail us nothing on the wall of his grow room.
Oh man, yeah. That's how it is in our addiction. Half measures avail us nothing. Might as well drink the whole bar. And then in recovery, same thing.
Mm-hmm. I say that often, and in fact, I've said it in some business meetings, and there have been people that stopped and they're like, "I'm writing that down right now."
Bill W. Bill Wilson. If you get a chance, there's a documentary on YouTube. Bill Wilson is 43 minutes long. It's also on the community tab of my channel, Soberdelic James. It is amazing. It will make you feel a part of one of the most important things, especially with your podcast and what you're doing. It'll make you feel like Time Magazine named Bill Wilson the healer, one of the 100 most important and influential people of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. And then an alcoholic came on the screen and said, he is the most important person of the 20th century. And I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, in the rooms and everything. Mm-hmm.
So if you want to, like, that live stream is still, it's on James's channel. You can find it and watch him take 11 grams and have the out of worldly experience. It's I admit, I mean, I watched the first little bit of it, but then I don't know, my ADHD just as I went off into the sticks, but I didn't know you took 11 grams. I'm going to go back and check that shit out. Have you ever watched that? Have you ever gone back and watched it?
Yeah, in the beginning, I watch it for sound issues and to make sure I mean, there was a point where my clothes started coming off. So I wanted to make sure, everything was kosher. And, so I did watch it, but it is like 3 or 5 hours long. And yeah, it's approaching 500,000 views. It's really, I have some of my videos, Anthony Hopkins, recovering addict, Danny Trejo, their speaker tapes are on my channel. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. And they were approaching 500,000 views. And then in 2021, I dropped that mushroom and it's already almost overtaking them, which started to get me worried. I'm sure you go through this. The both of you may wonder ethically, am I putting the right information out there? Is my toxicity as an addict seeping through, being cunning, baffling, and powerful? So very recently, I got rid of all my grow equipment, and I stopped smoking weed and everything. I know it's beneficial and medicinal, and it helps some people's recovery. For me, I was waking up smoking it and then smoking it until I go to sleep that night. I wasn't going to AA. I wasn't doing my live streams either. It was taking over. My addiction was taking over. I noticed the same thing with mushrooms, except mushrooms have the fortunate characteristic of I can have them in my house but not go for them. If I have alcohol in my house, you go for it, kind of thing. When you take psychedelics, it's not like, oh, I need to take some mushrooms so I feel better. It's like, I might take some mushrooms, or I might not, because it might not be that relieving. You might be facing your ego, and you might be battling with like all of your demons.
Yeah.
That's not a nice way to unwind at the end of the work week, hey?
Right.
Yeah, and I'll admit, sorry to interrupt, but I will admit, like, I've done a few ceremonies in the past year. And like I went with intention, because I mean, I was the guy that would do mushrooms at a festival and then have a very powerful trip and experience ego death in the mosh pit. You know, it's not a fun experience, and the most would call that a bad trip, right? But I mean, and my shaman that I work with, she says there are no bad trips, and I wholeheartedly agree, because I've had some powerful experiences in ceremony with intentions set. Like, I didn't go for the light show. I mean, of course, the light show is always beautiful, but there are things that my program of recovery, or it didn't matter who I talked to, it didn't matter the thoughts that I have. There are things that psilocybin showed me that opened the door for me to walk through, and I've been able to put those things to bed. And I know Donna will agree that that has happened, because I would come back from these ceremonies and think I'm different now. The trauma that I was facing, it does not have the same hold on me as it once did. And I attribute that to the experiences I had with the plant.
I would agree with that too. And also add that your recovery is probably one of the reasons that added to that, because ironically enough, I was on mushrooms when I decided it wasn't ethical to do mushrooms anymore. So
that is beautiful.
You know what I mean? The mushrooms are so, I don't know. I try not to put too much credit in them, because it's also God, AA, and my recovery. My mind and the mushrooms are just like, hey man, this is a character defect that you are holding on to. If you've ever read the book Drop the Rock, it's a very short book about, it's a great book about dropping the rocks, that, the character defects that you're holding on to so precious. Mine were substances, mind altering substances. And pot is so light and fluffy, and it has benefits. So it made its way in, but it was also taking my life away from me. I was just smoking pot. I wasn't living life. The mushrooms were kind of like that. I found myself I realized of all these years that I meant to microdose, I haven't microdosed once. And once you look in hindsight at that kind of evidence, is like, I haven't even tried to microdose once. I have always taken at least a gram or more. Well,
if one microdose is good, like 500 must be amazing.
Right. I love the quote. If there was a pill that gets me sober, I would break it up and snort 5 of them. That's just the way it works. That's the way your addiction talks to you. It's like, hey man, why don't you have 5 of them?
Yeah.
But the mushrooms,
just to make sure.
And right now, really, the 12 steps and AA is doing so much for me. I can literally just be like, that's another joke I say. I'm like, I'm breaking these 12 steps up and snorting them like rails. I'm getting high off of the 12 steps. It's like a high that beats all other highs, all other drunks. Being able to walk anywhere and just be relaxed and comfortable in my own skin. From doing esteemable things, I now have self-esteem. Helping others, my spirituality is becoming intact. The high of being able to be yourself with no guilt is higher than anything else. Mm-hmm. So even if I can talk myself into cannabis and mushrooms, I still feel that twinge that Donna, you were talking about it, that twinge of guilt. Is this my addiction sneaking up on me? And you know what? If that's all it is, I don't need it. I don't need it right now. And may not need it ever. The other thing is I'm on SSRIs. I'm on a low dose of Prozac, which seems to help. Every time I've tried to get off of it, it's not good. SSRIs, and I did a live stream on this, and psychedelics do not mix. No. It has to do with serotonin and all that. Yeah.
There's paperwork that we have to do with our shaman, and it's one of the things, like you cannot be on this when you do this. So yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah. And that adds to how I understand my God and the way it talks to me, my higher power and my higher self. And my higher power is basically like, you know what, you're doing awesome on the SSRIs. Why? Because when I would take mushrooms on the SSRIs, and I read up on this, and in the literature it says the SSRIs diminish the mushroom's intensity, but I personally felt that the mushrooms were also diminishing the effect of the antidepressant. So I was basically experiencing a weak, sad trip. Which, and it wasn't just sad revelations that can then become beneficial. It was like I was lacking some sort of serotonin or something. And it didn't feel good at all.
Wasn't productive.
No.
Yeah.
So where I do believe in plant medicine, right now, I'm getting every bit of medicine I need from the 12 steps of AA, and I have no problem with putting them down. But I am very interested in the research that's being done, and I am open to some of these clinics, a professional setting, a psychedelic experience in the presence of a therapist that helps you work through your stuff. But as far as dropping 11 caps and 11 grams and it sounds fun, and my addiction will take over.
That doesn't sound fun. That doesn't sound fun at all. That sounds terrifying.
It does.
I don't want to see Mars.
Not ready. I'm not ready for that.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not to say that I'll never experience that, because I'm open to and not, like I said, not for the light show, I'm open to trying these different medicines, like if ayahuasca ever called to me, I would certainly consider, and it has a couple of times, and maybe I'm just a little bit too fearful, but that 11, that's commitment, man. That's we're going places tonight. Let's look at a couple of more comments.
Right on.
Yeah.
Which
you want to do the thing? You pick. We have to get past this. I'm not picking anymore. You pick the comments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at Kathy's. Kathy Janess asks, actually, isn't it true that too much of anything can be harmful, even marijuana, which is quote unquote legal now?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yes.
Yeah. Too much anything can be bad for you.
Yep.
Yeah. Except for Hard Knocks Talks. You can have as much Hard Knocks Talks as it will never be bad.
And Soberdelic James.
Yes. And Soberdelic James. Yes. Yes.
That's one thing I've been talking about, the addiction to social media and swiping through reels on Instagram and stuff. And then the very next thing I'll say is subscribe and hit the bell to Soberdelic James.
Check out these reels. Let's see what Dr. John has to say there.
Dr. John says, as a treatment course, we just don't have enough data for the use of substances for the resolution of trauma and other.
Kathy's asking, any input about ketamine treatments, supervised, of course. I think that might be what you were talking about in those clinics, isn't that right, James? Because I know we have those here in Canada. We can get ketamine therapy, and you know, as far as like, we are not doctors here on Hard Knocks Talks. This is only our personal opinions, and the experiences that I've had with plant medicines. I would say that there's definitely medicinal qualities, medicinal uses for ketamine. Whether that's 100% true or not, I don't know, but I would be open to considering it, and I wouldn't like shut the door on anyone who's wanting to try it for the right reasons.
Right on. The same with psilocybin. Like I said, I am an addict, and I have noticed, you know, it's not something that I'm doing right now, as far as, because I'm an addict, and it's very sneaky and cunning and baffling and powerful, and it will sneak right up on me. However, yes, ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, DMT, these are all entering clinics, especially over in the Oregon area. And I think in Canada, they're probably wide open. God bless you up there.
Not quite wide open, but there definitely, there are some options. Yeah.
Yeah.
As an example, though, and going back to too much, for me, the addict, and I'm going to venture out and say, for addicts in general, one is too many and 1,000's not enough usually. Here's the thing about ketamine is one of my long-term subscribers and commenters over in the UK he admittedly had dependence, and I think he used the word addiction to ketamine. And I personally have never done it. I don't think. It might have slipped in like the 2000s with the raves and stuff, but I personally have never tried it. But even though I think it's classified as a psychedelic, if I'm not mistaken,
ketamine, yes.
Even though psychedelics are on a whole other level as far as substances and stuff, I think ketamine might also have some sedative catatonic type properties or something like that. It's stuff that we don't know, and we dive into as addicts, like, I'm gonna do all this ketamine, like the thing about it is, yes, even alcohol.
Sorry.
And it's gonna heal me.
I'm gonna live stream it.
And take my shirt off.
Even alcohol, it can be a medicine. It's an anesthetic, you know what I mean? But for the alcoholic, it's poison. It produces the phenomenon of craving, and some people, a lot of smarter people than myself, call it an allergy, a physical allergy, that it produces the phenomenon of craving. So what I'm saying is, drugs, medicines, mind-altering substances, these are all synonyms. Cocaine used to be used in dental practice, and ketamine was a cat tranquilizer. They all have their purpose. However, addicts like myself have to be very careful, because I'll take all the ketamine. I'll say this is good. 1 or 2 is good. I might as well take it all. There's no off switch. The phenomenon of craving it defies logic, which is why so many people have and even myself have a hard time understanding the word powerlessness. It's in the very first step of all the 12 steps, powerlessness. I thought I admitted it, and apparently I didn't, because powerlessness means powerlessness. You could die. You don't know what's going to happen. They call it spirits. They call alcohol spirits. Apparently this has origins of when you get to a certain point of intoxication, your spirit, it doesn't tolerate being in you anymore, so it leaves and you become possessed by another spirit. And I can relate to that, because so many people have said, James, you're an entirely different person when you get to a certain point. But cool, to round that up, it's basically everything can be a medicine, except for the addict. Almost, everything must be. You must be beware of it all, basically.
I think we'll cap it. Is there anything you'd like to send us off with tonight, James? Tell us where we can find you. Tell us where do you want to leave us with, man?
I have a channel, Soberdelic James is how you can find me. It's Soberdelic, like psychedelic and sober put together. Soberdelic, Soberdelic James. I live stream every night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Addiction and recovery, everything in between. I am totally confident and have my faith in the 12-step programs. I choose to go to Alcoholics Anonymous because I'm an alcoholic. But in my opinion, non-drug addicts and non-alcoholics could use the 12 steps as well. Everything in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous can be trusted. For those who say you don't want to go to meetings because you don't like the personalities, it says right in the big book, principles before personalities. So I guess to round it up is, if you're scared of AA, it's not you, it's your addiction that's scared of AA, because with AA, your addiction will not exist, and it's scared of that. And everything I have achieved is because of God, of my understanding. Another thing not to be scared of, and your addiction is scared of that as well. And I think that's about it. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Indeed.
And I hope
this was very enjoyable.
Yeah, I hope we can have future conversations. Maybe we can grace the screens of Soberdelic James' channel someday.
Indeed, I'm going to get on it. I'm going to get on it and invite you. I'll send you the link.
Maybe we can do a coordinated
thing.
Dose.
Oh,
you're kidding, of course.
Coordinated dose? No, we're not doing that. Never mind. Okay. Thanks so much, James. We'll let you go. We'll see you again. Take care.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, if you got something out of that, please click that like button at the bottom of the screen. Leave us a comment. Leave us your thoughts. We're always interested to hear what our community has to say, any opinions and all of the things. If you're not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world to us to know that we're making some good happen out there in the world. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcast, and Spotify and Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. That's all we have for you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.